The current Dr. Wondertainment Company does not endorse the tampering and or taking of children's souls for any purposes, but especially not when such tampering inevitably reduces a child's lifespan. Consequently, the creation of another popular line of Dr. Wondertainment products have also been discontinued. We made it. Somehow, against all odds, we've made it to another Friday. We're in week 32. Can you believe that? Is that right? Week 32? And we're more than halfway into the year. It's not great news for my New Year's resolutions. I'm still fat. It's okay. We're getting there. We're getting better. We're getting thinner. Some weeks. Some weeks we're not. Oh my, oh my. This is the Week 32 recap on SCP Cafe. I'm your host, Blue Soul, SCP Wiki moderator, chat operator, subreddit moderator, author, loving husband, dog petter, Cologne aficionado, Tottenham Hotspur supporter, and man buried under the weight of a significant amount of skips that were ready in July that people just sat on and sat on and sat on and sat on and sat on some more and then posted them when August came around. And this August appears to be the straw that broke the camel's back, because now staff have said enough. We're moving away from top rated of the month in favor of top rated of the last 30 days. I'm really for this, if it wasn't obvious already. It really is good news for everybody. For writers, you don't have to worry about the posting meta of, posting your strongest works on the first or the second to try and have a month to show up in that top rated of the month. Now it doesn't matter. Post any damn time of the month, you will get 30 days. For readers, this is useful too, because you're not going to get buried in an avalanche of new stuff that came out in one big whack, because whereas in week 31 we had 2 SCPs, in week 32 we had 19. That's absurd. It was not fun. The selection process was really not fun, and the other thing this does is for, curators and content creators like myself that, do try and keep up with things and cover them in, a weekly format. That means that some really good articles are getting, they're getting lost in the shuffle because people were, all trying to do the same thing in the same week. And the other thing that this kind of sucks is, like, if you are a new writer and you don't know about this weird thing where posting on the first or second is something that a lot of site veterans do, you are altogether likely to post at the wrong time and really screw yourself. Like, imagine writing something on the 31st in the evening and, a couple hours later, it is the next month, and your shit's nowhere to be found on top rated of the month. It never got a chance. We are eliminating a lot of problems along those lines for readers and writers with moving from best of the month to best of the last 30 days, a rolling 30-day count. And this is, I think, strictly a change for the better. This benefits just about everybody. So, and the top rated of the month is still technically a thing. We're not getting rid of it because we have so much of the site history tied up in archives of previous months, but it will not have the visibility that it has right now. You'll still be able to get to it via a link or two. We're not doing away with it. We are going to sort of push rolling 30 as the preferred, method of prestige in the short term. So that's fun. That, with any luck will be happening before the week 33 show, because we are already moving to votes, and I don't think there's been a single vote against the motion as of yet. So once that timer runs out, I am committing that change on top rated pages. We'll figure out what we're doing with the old archives. We'll keep those going, and yeah, no, it's a good thing, and I'm really happy that we're finally making that move. In cafe land, I want to thank my new patrons. I had a number of them this week, and your patronage is very much appreciated. Sam G, Seth M, welcome back. Jake M, Floppy Phoenix, and Cyan is not blue. I still have care packages to put together. They will all be going out at once. It would have been yesterday. I was sick. I was not well. I wasn't well this morning either, but I think I got over it. So those are going to get put together tonight and tomorrow and go out all at once. Patrons, do keep an eye on your Patreon inbox for a tracking number. These are going out all over the world, because we do have patrons in Germany, Australia, Canada, all over the place, which is really cool to me, and wanted to send you guys a little something by way of appreciation. On the iTunes side, if you're an iTunes listener and you aren't a subscriber, but you just sort of find the thing every so often, you should know iTunes has made a lot of changes this month to how podcasts are organized. This was previously under a category that now does not exist. So SCP Cafe has moved to the fiction category in the science fiction subcategory. There are some other similar productions in this category, notably SCP Archives, Welcome to Night Vale, and the No Sleep podcast, all present in this subcategory, so it seems like the best available fit from what they have to offer. So we'll see how it goes. iTunes has never been a huge audience, and it's kind of hard to say sometimes because they give some, their numbers are really weird. You can't just find out how many people listen to a particular episode. It's like, well, this many devices that were subscribed consumed this much of the content as a percentage. Like, Jesus, guys, can you just tell me how many plays I had? No, that's too hard. iTunes is worth Apple's worth I don't know, $300 trillion. This is beyond the scope of what mortal man can accomplish, apparently. So that's all I got for stuff other than recap. Let's get into it, because this week was an absolute bloodbath. There were 19 skips to choose between, and the final cut on this was, I spent half an hour weighing which ones I wanted to talk about when I was down to 6, getting that down to 5. I do have 5 with a long boy of the week, and we'll get into it. SCP-4938, Sweat of the Sun by T. Rutherford. So we have an object class of Euclid and a full-width image in black and white of what looks to be an old-timey mine shaft with big wooden support struts holding the roof up, helping support it. And I missed him the first time. There is a man in the center of the frame. He's wearing a dark suit, so he's not super easy to see in the darkened area that he's standing in. And the caption here reads that this is Mine 15 in Feldspar, Colorado in 1922. Remember that year. Edwin Hallowell featured, center shot. So we have 2 paragraphs of procedures, and they note that assets from the Foundation embedded within the U.S. legal system will continue to support Project Fool's Gold, and this project aims to defame Kirk Hallowell for insider trading and embezzlement. Meanwhile, all Hallowell Mining Corporation assets have been acquired by the Foundation and will continue legitimate operations. So there's quite a bit to unpack just in the beginning. We're getting involved in some stuff that typically we're not really getting up to, so we're setting some expectations here for some shady dealing going on that the Foundation is involved in. Additionally, a 12-kilometer quarantine zone has been established around the town of Feldspar. Bi-weekly deliveries of food and goods will be provided to the population as dictated by the current project director. We have a standard cover in effect indicating that it is quarantined due to naturally occurring radiation, and we are required to wear full radiation suits when entering 4938, which is described as the town of Feldspar itself, located in Custer Valley, Colorado, It is officially designated a gold rush ghost town, but Feldspar has been the source of some $97 million of commercial gold since 1948. We go immediately from that to describing Dash 1, which is an anomalous form of radiation that affects a 10 cubic kilometer area, including the town of Feldspar, and individuals exposed to this radiation for more than 20 hours may develop tumor-like growths throughout their body, and as these growths metastasize, heavy metals will spontaneously and proportionally generate within. Gold is the most prevalent tumor instance, found in 76% of all cases, but we've also found platinum, gallium, bismuth, and even uranium. And as a result, prolonged exposure to Dash 1 has an extremely high fatality rate. And the native residents of Feldspar have a unique response to this radiation. These tumors are formed more rapidly and in far greater size. This will usually cause an extreme loss of mobility along with persistent pain and discomfort. And despite this fact, nearly a third of the 634 residents of Feldspar, Colorado, are over 100 years old and in stable health. Once no longer exposed to this radiation, these individuals experience a rapid decline in physical health, and no known method exists to relocate this population without extreme loss of life. So we have this radiation that is affecting the residents, but once they're removed from the presence of it, they begin to go downhill rapidly. That's an interesting quandary that we've been dealt. The article goes on to say that for nearly 80 years, the Hallowell Mining Corporation had been utilizing the Feldspar populace for profit. So in exchange for basic supplies and sundry goods, individuals would submit to the surgical removal of their metallic growths. And this continued all the way until 2004, when one Mrs. Dana Walsh, a Feldspar resident, placed a call with the National Guard, and the information she provided was intercepted by the Foundation. Project Fool's Gold was launched soon after, and Feldspar residents have so far been non-hostile, but also very uncooperative. So that's interesting. Why are they uncooperative to us if we're possibly in a position to help them, or at least gain some understanding and maybe figure out a solution here? The rest of the article takes place between an interview, between a researcher and this Dana Walsh, who is 102 at the time of the interview. And this is quite lengthy prose in this sort of southern drawl that T. Rutherford uses in a few of these articles. He used it with Stalled Conversation, had a similar sort of feel to it, and I think this is pulled off quite well. It does meander at times, but that could very much be kind of the intent. You have to be careful with that, though, because what will happen is your eyes kind of glaze over and you're looking for the next important word, and when the all of the little details that are in here are rather subtle, and it is kind of risky to, insert the some plot points that may really hint at a much deeper story in with this meandering, drawling sort of tone. What we can take away from the first part of this interview is that Walsh doesn't actually think that the Foundation can help her, and is only interested in arranging a deal to evacuate her great-great-granddaughter from the area. So with that background, she agrees to tell her side of the story and sort of the history of the town. And where we have our plot points are sort of like I was hinting at. They're names, they're people, and you have to sort of keep track of who's related to who and how did this all come to pass. The patron of the Hallowell Mining Company way back in the 1920s was an extremely fortunate man, had great luck in the gold rush, and had two sons that split the business when he passed away, and one is ruthless and the other was quote, a stupid risk taker, and he was in charge of this town of Feldspar. He put his entire financial backing into this town, but had no real luck in the town, and basically maybe even thought that the town was collectively holding out on him. So, and Walsh indicates that part of this could be, why was he, continuing to sink money into the town? It could be because he felt guilty, and we get into what could be the reasoning behind the anomaly initially manifesting. The daughter of the current man in charge of the town, of the mining town, Julia, and another girl in the town, another miner's daughter, Raquel, were in a sort of a relationship, but, this is the 20s, you don't talk about that sort of thing, and it didn't work. The other girl got paired up with the butcher's son for a discount on back bacon, and Mr. Hallowell brought in a city boy tycoon's son for his daughter. So 2 arranged marriages, and neither of them went at all well. Both the girls got pregnant around the same time, which isn't in itself unusual. Things got strange, though, when they gave birth on the same day, same hour. It could have even been down to the second, but no one at Raquel's home owned a watch. Now, both of these babies were pale with dark eyes and perfect yellow tufts of hair, which is problematic, as both the girls and both their husbands had black hair, and this causes every blonde fella in town getting the side eye from the collective populace. And the very next day, people started getting sick, fevers, pains, and the growths, and nobody knew what it was, but it was spreading fast, and for the first time in her memory, the inn was empty at noon. For days and days, the streets were deserted, except for the occasional fella stumbling around like a drunkard, coughing and tossing up their lunch. 10 died in the first week, and they were burned a half-mile out of town. And everybody was not only getting sick, they started getting a little crazy. A Mr. Peterson, his wife had just passed, so he spends all day at this point just wandering around the town quoting Bible verses, signs of the devil come in twos, twins born of different mothers, a biblical plague born of greed, and the worse things got, the more people listened to him. And Walsh recounts how she was doing what she could to help the 2 mothers, as much as she could. In particular, Raquel, the one not married into money at this point, trying to, sneak her milk for the baby, as nobody else was willing to help her. And for the first time in trying to help her, she got to actually see one of the twins, and it looked like any other baby, no different, until she saw its eyes, and said they weren't fully wrong, really, they just didn't catch the light right. There's no shine to them. It was almost like looking at a paper drawing. Just 2 little white circles with a single black dot. So dark, like a mine shaft stretching on down forever. And we have a pause here in the dialogue, and we note that she has a coughing fit and she's doubled over, and the researcher tries to help steady her, but that's incredibly difficult because she weighs 340 pounds, of which that is 1/3 biomass and 2/3 heavy metals. But she wants to finish telling this story, and the town kept getting worse. She heard shouting outside her window and screaming, and locked the door, and found out that some houses got lit on fire. People were killed. Mr. Hallowell died in the town square. They beat him to death. Julia, Raquel, their husbands, their mothers, even some of their friends. People say it was an accident, just some drunk, scared people who got too caught up in things. Nobody even talked about it the next day. They acted like it never happened. And Horowitz, our researcher, says, "That's it? There was no investigation afterwards?" And she notes, "It was a different time, son. The law didn't stretch out this far." Someone did notice, though. Douglas Hallowell, the other brother. He showed up a month later looking for his family. We told him the sickness got them. It was the worst lie we ever told. He brought in doctors. He wanted to know what killed his brother. Instead, he found what was growing inside of us. So that's 3 of your questions answered. The last one should need asking by now. Your organization is just telling us the same stuff we heard from Douglas Hallowell. We're here to help. The tumors need to be removed. It's not about the gold. Bullshit. It's all bullshit. And Horowitz cuts her off, asks, what about the babies? She's not comfortable with this question, but eventually caves and said, they buried them. They took them into the mountain, into one of the old dry mine shafts, and buried them. And Horowitz says, I see. So you believe, and gets cut off. Ain't nothing to do with belief, boy, I know it. We're cursed. Towns like these aren't meant to keep on living. We're supposed to come and go with the gold. For what we did, by God, I think we're going to live forever. And Mrs. Walsh dies in her home the next day with a previously undocumented tumor found pressing on her medulla containing 0.05 grams of 24-karat gold. We go into this final addendum, Addendum A, and this addendum discusses some exploration that we're doing into the mines around this town, and using specially designed Geiger counters, 2 unique geological formations were discovered, -2 and -3. They're 18 cubic meter ore clusters composed of an unknown platinum composite with a density outclassing osmium as the densest terrestrial metal. And despite their identical chemical composition, each cluster emits a different form of radiation. D-class personnel exposed to each of them separately show no adverse effects. Simultaneous exposure is required to form -1 tumorous growths. So we discuss that we could mine out both of these clusters and separate them to a distance to neutralize their effect. But the O5 Council and the Ethics Committee have ruled against this action so as to maintain the health and safety of the Feldspar residents. Medical staff will continue removing tumors as they present. Precious metals collected will be put to use in Foundation equipment and funding efforts. The Department of Finance has been tasked with regulating the export of gold as to prevent global inflation. Honestly, $94 million in how many years? Like 60, 70 years? Probably not enough to really move the needle on inflation, but it's a nice little line that we're trying to cover all our bases here. So below this, we have our closing note here, and it's from 054. It's a notice to all staff currently assigned to this skip. It reads, your concerns, both outspoken and privately discussed, have not gone unheard. We are not exploiting the people of Feldspar. We are not harvesting them as HMC once did. What we are doing is providing necessary medical aid to a community stricken with a unique illness. Discarding the precious metals recovered during this process would simply be wasteful. Most importantly, cursed gold does not exist. We have found absolutely no evidence to corroborate the testimony of Mrs. Dana Walsh. Edwin Hallowell died in a mining accident in 1921. Julia Hallowell died of tuberculosis later that year. She had no child. SCP-4938 is an anomalous form of geological radiation, nothing more. We consider this discussion closed. 054 end article. Now, funny thing, I asked you to remember a year. The year was 1922. This note from 054 indicates that Edwin Hallowell died in a mining accident in 1921. But back up to the top of this skip, we have a picture of him, alive and well, in 1922. Somebody is not coming clean with the whole story. And that, amongst other reasons, is why I chose this work. There are a lot of little subtle things that you could take away from this piece. In fact, I found this to be quite nice. There are spoilers in the comments, and T. Rutherford has denoted them as gold spoilers and silver spoilers. And the silver spoiler indicates what I noted, that the Foundation is lying. The picture is taken in 1922. The gold level spoiler, and this is one of those where it could very well be what's the word I'm looking for? The intent of the author, but I don't think there's enough in it to necessarily lock it down to where it must have been this answer. The spoiler here is that there's only one anomaly. The strongest desires become reality in the town of Feldspar. So that's something to consider, as you read through this and think about how that ties to all of these things. That is probably a touch too subtle to really have come out for the reader. There's not enough in the piece, I think, to lead us to that conclusion. But there are enough other, really interesting and, frankly disturbing things. These two huge ore clusters, presumably in the area where these two babies were buried, is a really nice, creepy touch. I don't think the what we've referred to as the gold spoiler is obvious. And if that is, something that you really want to convey, I don't know that this did that. We are dumb. We need hand-holding sometimes. And this was the sort of thing that, I ran into with the last thing that I wrote is like, when you go, how obvious do I have to make this? Really, really obvious, because you know all of the details in your head and you try and, get little bits of it out there. But at the end of the day, you've got to do a lot more than that for it to convey clearly through text, which is really the only thing we've got available to us to get all of our meaning from. We do also mention at the top this project Fool's Gold, where we are defaming Kirk Hallowell, presumably the rightful heir to the Hallowell Mining Corporation name and all of the assets. We're defaming him for insider trading and embezzlement, and we have acquired all HMC assets instead. And I don't know that that's, obviously, yes, that's why we have this final note of, we're not doing the exact same thing, except we really are actually exactly the same thing. So this is, sort of an ugly foundation. I don't know how I feel about 054 being the one that has to tell the lie here. I don't think that really buys us anything, and that is going to run counter to some people's preconceived notions of what the 05s are motivated by. For my money, the Foundation does not need money. They have access to so many things that they effectively have, a never-ending money supply in the first place. So the motivations here don't really work for me and how I sort of have things playing out in my head. But the overall story that we're telling of, this sort of nuanced horror story set in, an Old West mining town at its core is really good, regardless of any of those headcanon-y sort of issues you might have. The dialogue's good. And overall, a really, really outstanding piece. This was a solid +1 from me. Moving on, a Series 1 rewrite. You don't see one of these every day. This is SCP-577, All Alone in the Moonlight. This was formerly Bullet Cat, which was not much of a skip, in all honesty. It didn't age well, and even, amongst its peers, I was never a huge fan of it. This is an altogether different way to that we've taken the story, and I think this is overall quite good. We have an object class of Euclid and procedures that indicate that the skip is to be contained within a large containment unit, reinforced with steel ballistic shielding, and all doors to the containment unit and related areas must be capable of remote operation, and twice a year, D-class are to be sent into the chamber to inspect the ballistic shielding for any damage caused by the skip and make any repairs, remove any cadavers or detritus left from prior entities, and all personnel entering this containment area must wear, as you might guess, full body ballistic protection. And nowadays, 577 is described as an animated, levitating mass of ammunition of various calibers that persistently spins in a spherical formation. Roughly 40% of this ammo is 9mm, but there have also been large quantities of 10mm and 45 ACP rounds also noted. Bullets within this sphere are capable of leaving the mass and firing at speeds comparable to those from a standard handgun, which is in itself maybe a bit of a misnomer. You could probably pick and choose meters per second for a little bit of added oomph. because something like, a 50 AE is not going to have the same sort of muzzle velocity as, say, a 22 caliber. Not a big deal, but it was one of those, I didn't notice it on my first reading. Now it's like, maybe the little, let's give us a little bit of specificity here. We have also noted that this animated levitating mass of ammo has been observed to form recognizable shapes and likenesses, commonly those of domestic animals. Its mass rises consistently, with approximately 1,000 new pieces of ammo appearing in the mass each year. The skip is quite aggressive towards all Foundation staff and D-Class who have a background in law enforcement. A large amount of its mass will fire towards these staff members, resulting in physical injury and occasionally death. But research has found that it acts friendly towards a small number of D-Class, typically those taken from the U.S. prison and homeless populations. So we go from this into an addendum. This is the only addendum in the piece. This is, we have sort of a timeline of an inspection log and then an interview. So a D-Class enters the containment chamber. 577 approaches it and assumes the shape and size of a large cat. And D-Class begins doing its thing, inspecting the walls and so on and so forth. But it's stopping every so often to pet this cat. And after a few minutes, it stops washing the walls. He appears to be crying and stops working and slumps against the wall. The skip sits next to him and rests its head on his leg. And the D-Class continues crying and holds the skip closely. Staff order the D-Class to leave the containment chamber. He does not immediately comply, instead continues holding it. And the skip appears to guide the D-Class's hand into itself, and the D-Class pulls his hand out, and it is covered in what appears to be blood, stares at his hand for several moments before opening it to reveal a bullet that throbs slightly and drips blood. He holds his hand to his chest and whispers something. We didn't pick it up. And after another minute and 8 seconds, he stands up, embraces the skip, and exits the containment chamber. Upon being brought out of this containment chamber, the bullets stop moving, all other anomalous effects cease. The D-Class is detained, and the bullet is confiscated for analysis. The blood was found to be genetically similar to the D-Class, but not identical. Ballistic analysis of it indicates that it had impacted flesh or some other soft substance. However, the D-Class was not harmed in any way. And this bullet was returned to the D-Class prior to the interview with a Dr. Vanderbilt and our D-Class, who indicates that it turned the skip turned itself into his cat, a cat that me and his brother helped as a kid. He would recognize his tail anywhere. Interesting. We get a little backstory here that he believes the cat said, "I'm sorry," and is adamant this is his cat, and Dr. Vanderbilt concedes the point and asks him to elaborate. The D-Class says that him and his brother had been kicked out of their house, and a stray cat found them. We gave a little bit of our food. He stuck around, and his brother named him Duck because he liked the sign when we were learning sign language together. So brother's deaf, and the cat helped us survive and kind of trained him to be like a therapy cat. My brother was deaf. It's hard enough not having a home. Duck helped him a lot until the last time he saw Duck was when he came to find me. Doesn't know how. He was always Ricardo's cat first. He led me back to where we were staying, cops all over the area. I never got to say goodbye. I was so angry and scared. Duck tried to comfort me, but I threw rocks at him. I didn't mean to, just a part of me hated Duck for showing me. He hissed at me and ran away. Saw on the news a few days later that an unnamed male had threatened a police officer. The cop was naturally afraid for his life and just shot. We were just two kids trying to survive. Of course, the news doesn't bother to ask questions, and instantly started to list stats about gang violence. And the doctor says, "That sounds rough, but I'm not really sure how it's relevant." And the D-Class shouts at him, "Because that thing gave me a chance to say goodbye. You've probably forgotten what your family feels like, but this bullet was my brother's heart. I lived beside him for years. I know what his heartbeat feels like from the nights we spent trying to keep warm, or the times he was afraid when a cop drives past, or when it jumped if I woke him. And for those few seconds where this bullet was still beating, I was able to say goodbye. I felt his blood drain onto my hands, and I was able to comfort him. The doctor says, well, I hope you're doing better now. The D-Class says, I don't know if it was all in my head, but knowing all the weird stuff here, I know that Ricardo could sense I was here. Even now, 10 years later. We end the article there. So there's some heavy stuff in here, and the thing that this immediately made me think of was something I saw a couple of days ago from Jabuki Youngwhite on Twitter, who mentioned growing up around gun violence in Chicago was really crazy because the media would always describe it as senseless, when the reality of the situation is it's this cycle of motivated gang and revenge killings. And the media would push this narrative that black people were indiscriminately killing each other. There's no interviewing the shooter's family on TV, looking at their Facebook posts, decoding their ideology, because that would contradict the message that violence is supposed to be innate in these people. And, that it's interesting then that when a white person is violent, it must surely be for a reason that could be studied and understood and empathized with. And I shared this little tweet chain with Maydi, and she'd indicated that is exactly what was sort of on her mind. So this is, it's heavy stuff. It's highly relevant for the moment in time. And for what this is of a Series 1 rewrite, we have sort of a blending of two worlds, because we have this gee whiz sort of skip that, behaves in an interesting way. And we have, all of the trappings of Series 1. And then we have a really interesting narrative going on as well. So I like the ground that this covers in trying to sort of stay true to its roots, but also make a point that is on the writer's mind. That said, I feel like maybe the skip stops a touch short. Maybe we don't explain quite enough. Yes, we can make some inferences here that this is this ammunition, maybe, victims of gun violence in some way, and that is also why, they're hostile largely to law enforcement that are, in proximity to it. So, but at the same time, like this, the interview, just it ends quite abruptly, and yes, it says everything it needs to say, but it doesn't feel quite like, we don't have quite that moment, that denouement that we, like, everything's explained and we walk away, with a particular feeling, with that, happy or sad or whatever. I feel like this needs just a little something in the end to provide that satisfaction, that sense of closure to the reader. This definitely finishes the story, but I still feel like it needs just a touch more. And I that said, off the top of my head, if you ask me what it should be, I don't know. So, take that for what it is. This is a great skip, regardless of that. This is, like I said, a good balance of Series 1 and modern trends, and I had no qualms giving this a +1. All right, now moving on, and this is really incredible. One of 4 goddamn skips in 6 days by Tanhony, who was took a little break, hiatus, whatever you want to call it, came back like a house on fire. I actually have 2 of theirs that I'm going to be talking about as the next 2 works. The first one here is SCP-4162, titled An Egg That Kills You for No Reason. We have no images anywhere in the piece, and an object class of Euclid, and the procedures, basically we have a containment zone set up in Foundation-controlled waters off the coast of Mexico. And in this area, we have 2 D-class immobilized via restraints, present on small boats, 1 on each side of this containment zone. We never really specify the size here, and I would maybe like to see that, because I don't know if this is like, is it a kilometer? Is it 10 kilometers? What's the, if they're on opposite ends, can they see each other? What, just one of those things that I think be nice for the sake of immersion. So one on either side of the containment zone in order to serve as bait for 4162 to ensure it doesn't roam outside of the containment zone. Once the skip has terminated one of these two personnel and begins targeting the other, the terminated individual is to be replaced immediately. So presumably they have to be at least kind of far apart for this plan to work. We also say that this cycle is repeated indefinitely so as to prevent the skip from selecting a target located outside this zone. Any individuals attempting to approach or pass through the containment zone are to be repelled immediately by on-site Marine personnel. In addition, a no-fly zone has been established directly above this containment zone and the immediate surrounding area. And we get into the description. It is an intangible ovoid object, red in coloration, 3 meters tall and 1 meter wide. Big egg. Big red, intangible egg. It possesses no visible means of movement, but somehow does it anyway. It floats about a meter in the air and proceeds linearly in a certain direction. During this process, it will pulsate several times a minute. The purpose of this is unknown. I like that. That's not normally a thing I would advise readers to attempt. This sort of fluffy doesn't actually add anything to the story, to the narrative, but this has a very old school feel, and I think it actually serves to the credit of this piece. The skip will constantly move towards the targeted individual at a speed slightly faster than that of the target itself. In cases where the target's stationary, it will move as slowly as 0.1 kilometers an hour, but it has also been recorded as reaching speeds as high as 930 kilometers an hour on occasions where targets have attempted to escape via aircraft. So, fast egg. Big fast egg. We don't really know the maximum speed of it, and due to the intangible nature of it, there are no known means of slowing or stopping its movement below these boundaries. And once it gets within a meter of its target, a rapid expansion of air will take place in the target's skull, causing their cranium to violently explode after a period of 3 to 5 seconds. So, big egg sees you, approaches you, you can't run from it, closes in on you, gets within a meter, your head fucking explodes. Got it. It's sapient, and despite possessing no bodily means of doing so, is capable of speaking. The voice is a high-pitched voice reminiscent of that of a prepubescent child. And despite its hostile behavior, it's invariably talkative and friendly when engaged in conversation by any individual, including its current target. So the rest of this article is taken up by interview logs with this thing, this big, fast, head-exploding egg. What I really love with this dialogue, and I can tell this was totally on purpose, is this skip is absolutely infuriating to hold a conversation with. It's really well done. It's not something that you can just say, I'm going to make an annoying skip and have it succeed, because it can be annoying on a downvote level. This is annoying on a, oh man, God, I have to upvote it. So we do all of these interviews with a drone because, well, fucking thing explodes your head. You're not going to get too close to it. The skip is currently moving towards its target at a speed of 0.1 kilometers an hour, so a very, very, very slow walk. So the dialogue here, like I said, is very frustrating. We ask, can you hear me? He says, of course I can hear you. What a weird thing to say. What are you supposed to be, like a bird? No, I'm communicating with you via this drone. It's like a robot I'm using to talk to you. Do you know what a robot is? Well, duh, do I know what a robot is? You're pretty strange, Oh, all right. My name is Dr. Spencer. Is it all right if I ask you some questions? Well, I've got nothing else to do. What do you want to ask? Could you tell me where you came from? Oh, that's an easy one. I know this. There was a boat a little way back, and I came from over there. No, I meant before that. Before that, I was over at this boat I'm heading to now. Are you okay? There's a pause. Spencer says, I think I'm not getting myself across properly. Where did you originally come from? I have to go now. Let's talk later, okay? Wait, couldn't you just answer my question? Bye. And interview's terminated. We got that kind of stuff going on. So the D class is where we have the initial sort of dialogue here. The skip says hi, and the D class says, "What the fuck? What the fuck is that? No! Stay the hell away from!" Boom! Head explodes. Bye. It begins moving back towards the previous target, located at the other side of the containment zone, and the skip begins humming as the drone approaches. Hello? Is it alright if I talk to you now? Skip's still humming. Hello? And Skip yelps in surprise. And Spinner says, "Oh, I apologize if I startled you." Skip says, "Ah, that's fine. I was just coming up with a little tune. There's nothing like a good song. What did you want to talk about?" Spencer says, "Why did you kill that man?" Skip says, "Yeah, I killed that guy." Spencer says, "Yep, but why?" He's dead now. That's fine. I don't get what you're saying." Spencer says, I'm aware that you killed him. What I'm asking you is your reasoning for doing so." "Well, his head blew up. I'm going to go now. I need to get to the next guy, okay?" We end this log. I love these. It's terrible and awful to put this Dr. Spencer through this, and Spencer finally snaps in this third log. So Spencer tries again. He says, "Hello, yes, I would really like to talk to you if that's all right." He says, "Hi, Mr. Spencer, what do you want to talk about? I have a few minutes." Spencer says, "Do you intend to kill the man you're currently approaching?" Skip says, "Sure am." Spencer says, "Could you not?" "What do you mean by that?" "Well, could you refrain from killing him? Is that something you're able to do? You're not making any sense. Are you feeling okay?" "I'm not sure how many more ways I can phrase this. Could you refrain from killing your target? Can you not kill him?" "I'm going to blow up his head, yeah?" No! "Okay, listen. You and I have built a rapport, yes?" Skip says, "Is that like a house or something?" Spencer says, "No, it means we have a good relationship. Is that something you'd agree with?" Skip says, "Yeah, you're my little buddy." "Well, say that I was standing there right after you killed your target. What would you do?" "I'd kill you." Spencer goes, "But why? Jesus, fuck." Skip says, "You need to calm down, okay? I can't talk now. I have to kill this guy. Good to hear from you, though." And begins his final approach towards the D-Class, who catches sight of it and says, "Hi." D-Class laughs, says, "Okay, what the hell is this supposed to be? There's a giant egg floating towards me." He gets within a meter. 3 seconds later, D-Class head explodes. Bye. Skip begins moving towards the other side of the containment zone. The skip does not respond further when prompted. The interview is terminated, and Dr. Spencer is admonished for unprofessional conduct during the interview, and we end this log. And I lied. We have an addendum. It's an advisory note from Dr. Spencer. 14 subsequent interviews were conducted with SCP-4162, invariably providing no new information on its origins or intentions. As a result, I would recommend no future attempts be conducted due to the clear waste of resources. Please reassign me. I would really appreciate it. End article. I love this whole thing because, given the Foundation universe, there has to be an entity like this that is this infuriating, unstoppable killing machine that doesn't even know what you're talking about when you ask it to not kill things, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it aside from try and, protect the general public from it. It's a great concept. It feels like a very old school skip. It feels like a Series 1, Series 2 piece in all of the best ways, in that we don't spend a lot of time. We don't need a real deep narrative here. In fact, we're kind of defying it. We're saying, you're not going to get your answers because this skip doesn't know what the fuck you're talking about when you ask about where it came from, why does it kill, can we not get it to kill? No. We don't do that around here. So I love it for the total change of pace that it represents. This was a really clever work and a very easy +1. Moving on, the other Tanhony piece that we're going to talk about this week, SCP-4156, titled Last Bastion. This one has an object class of Thaumiel and an image of a red sky. Could be a sunset. with some black, dark shaded trees in the foreground. But the caption indicates this might be something else. Because it says, this is the sky as visible from -1 prior to environmental restoration. So this could be something a fair bit more ominous than just a typical sunset with some peculiarly red clouds. The procedures are lengthy. They are, looks to be 6 paragraphs. The gist of it is to keep people and things out of -1 in order to maintain an ash-free atmosphere. Deliveries of food and other necessities are brought in the first of each month. Observation of all -2s should be conducted using the hidden microphones and cameras that have been established throughout -1. All media devices used by -2 are monitored by personnel. Any deviation from a -2's acceptable behavior should be handled by returning them to their default state and logging the cause of their deviation, and known causes are to be countered via the use of kaleidoscope. We make several mentions of kaleidoscope in the procedures. Furthermore, in the event of the unscheduled death of a -2 specimen, a replacement is to be produced using -3. So we have a -1, a -2, a -3. If a -2 specimen's personal narratives mean that they would logically spend a length of time outside -1, they'd be brought into storage, given false memories of their time outside -1 via kaleidoscope, and returned to -1 at an appropriate date. Learning computer TA2 Howard is to procedurally generate media content for consumption by specimens of -2. All -3 instances are maintained and repaired in accordance with the provided instructions, and production of any -2 specimens using -3 must be approved by director call from a selection of pre-arranged templates. So quite a lot of stuff going on in the procedures, and we basically cut to the chase and explain exactly why in the first paragraph of the description, which I will read verbatim. SCP-4156 is the collective designation for a number of anomalous items used in conjunction as an experimental method for a manual history reset following the occurrence of Event Indigo, the resultant destruction of SCP-2000, and the subsequent collapse of human civilization. The SCP-4156 project was officially proposed and put into effect by Director Simon Call following the occurrence of Event Indigo on September 2nd, 2034. So just like that, we are establishing brand new ground on the wiki. That's what you have to do, is lay out a really compelling backdrop to put your story in, and it doesn't really matter that it contravenes some of the other stuff that we've got. The fact is, 2000 is in Yellowstone. Yellowstone is home of a supervolcano. It's not a great place for it, in all honesty, especially given how many ways the world could end by means of a supervolcano. So yeah, what we've got here is a human civilization collapse, and 2000 also fails. So 4156 is how we are trying to make it work. And what we have as -1 is the small town of Winston, Ohio, which has been restored to its condition prior to Event Indigo over the course of several years, specifically restored to the state it was in 2017. All of the buildings within this city have been tapped with microphones and cameras. Feeds of all of these devices are accessible from Site 98. -2 is described as 6,297 artificial humans which have been produced by -3. They've been given false memories appropriate for their roles as citizens of Winston, Ohio, and all memory installation and alteration is performed via use of the prototype kaleidoscope system originally designed for societal amnestic purposes. We are using kaleidoscope to implant memories and alter them as needed. We're also using it to basically make these artificial humans unaware of Foundation personnel or any evidence of this Event Indigo. -3 is described as 300 devices derived through repurposing of SCP Black Box, capable of producing these artificial humans when provided with a sufficient amount of biomass. Each one consists of a standing chamber along with a control console through which the desired attributes for the specimen can be specified. And while working at full tilt, this system is capable of fully replenishing the population of -1, Winston, Ohio, in a span of 48 hours. So we have explained a lot of stuff in this description. We've created a very interesting, very compelling situation. And it's almost like, it's interesting because we very clearly have artificial humans. It doesn't sound like they can reproduce without the purpose of -3, without, this artificial human creator of -3. So my first question as I was reading this is why? We have like this tranquility lane thing going on where, they aren't aware of us. They go about their day, but to what end? If, human civilization has collapsed, and this is followed up on in a really excellent manner. The first log we have is under a collapsible, and it says system failure log, and it explains situations where some part of this 4156 system has failed and what action was taken, and additional notes. And we have some interplay here between Foundation characters through these failure logs. So the first failure in the log is instance 4830. This instance was designed with hearing difficulties. They were not properly immobilized by Kaleidoscope during the monthly food delivery because they were too far from the nearest hidden speaker, and presumably, they couldn't hear it anyway. But what they saw was that everybody else in the town became immobilized, so it freaked out and tried to flee the area. So security was dispatched, they tranquilized it, and reacquired it as it attempted to flee. We modified its hearing aid to transmit cognito agents when required by Kaleidoscope. And we have some notes here, and we have the senior researcher Halson and director Call, and Halson says that it worries him that this wasn't done right from the beginning. Why did we even make this thing with hearing issues? And why didn't we have measures in place to accommodate it? This all just makes the project that much more difficult to maintain. And Call says, I understand and appreciate your concerns, David, but it's inevitable that some things like these slip through the cracks. If we want to recreate society as it was, we can't make changes to it just to make things easier for ourselves. All great works start off flawed. All I ask is that you have a little faith for a little while longer. In the second instance, there was memory maintenance going on, which is nice and unsettling. Numerous citizens of this town got contradictory and incompatible memories. Many of them went comatose, and others engaged in suicidal or homicidal behavior. All specimens were forced into an inactive state via Kaleidoscope. Defective specimens were retrieved, and as memory repair was deemed non-viable, they were euthanized, and identical replacements were created and reintroduced. Halson concedes that this is all new to everybody involved, and that some of these incidents are unavoidable, but replacing these humans is not something that can be done lightly. It requires resources, and these resources won't last forever, and if we wish the project remains viable, we must take greater care in the future. And Call replies that following my personal review of this failure, I have to conclude the guidelines I set out were simply not followed. I believe I made it quite clear alterations to the personal narratives of the -2 beyond my original specifications were not allowed under any circumstances. This is unacceptable. So they may be in the right here. We don't ever, find out who had the right of this particular incident. We have a few more of these things are not going well, though. We have too much ash and soot in the atmosphere causing mass euthanization and replacement. And the engineer at this point gets involved, says, look, I can mask all of this atmospheric contamination, but I cannot get rid of it. It's mostly there. And, I wish I could flip a switch and make the air clean again, but I can't. And Halson says the next generation of these Dash-U should be designed with more durable respiratory systems. And if we can't get rid of the contamination, let's give them the tools to better survive it. And Director Call denies this. Says the purpose of 4156 is to recreate human civilization as it was. If we were to make changes, that wouldn't be recreating it as it was, now would it? I'm ordering the construction of further, basically atmospheric cleaning devices in greater proximity to the town. We have more issues. The specimens perceive these atmospheric engines, and due to some conflicting programming by Kaleidoscope, the majority of the population go into comatose states. The remaining conscious engage in suicidal and homicidal behavior. We again replace and euthanize all the specimens. We put 2 additional learning computers to task to contact surviving Foundation sites in order to share the duties of procedurally generating media. The issue here was that the learning computer in charge of this fucked up, and the media that it is procedurally generating is a series of random tones and screeches, which they didn't care for one bit. Call basically says further alterations to the scenario at this point would render the entire project pointless. And this was the situation that really made me think of Tranquility Lane, which was a thing in Fallout 3, which is far too old for my comfort at this point, which was basically this artificial reality where these people were placed in pods and had to live out the fantasies of a particular person with the ability to manipulate them and make them, do all sorts of terrible stuff. We have a chain of failures after this. Severe developmental errors happens twice. Almost all of the population expire very shortly after creation. Some are in vegetative states. We have one that says the specimens were minor. There were minor deviations, but all the specimens are viable. The majority of the deviations are merely aesthetic in nature, hair color and facial features. And the corrective action here was that all specimens were recycled. A new generation is produced, and Halson wants to know why. This was a waste of resources. Surely it doesn't matter what they look like so long as their behavior is the same. And we have our final one in the log. It indicates that a hostile survivor community identified as deserters from the U.S. Army attacked the town seeking food and shelter. They were engaged by on-site security and repelled after a 6-hour confrontation with heavy casualties on both sides. Large numbers of the Dash-2 specimens were also killed during the fighting, and it is believed further members of the populace fled Dash-1 during the confrontation. The corrective action notes that Director Call's location has not yet been confirmed, so further action is not yet taken. And we end the failure log there, and we have a note under another collapsible that is a message from Senior Researcher Halson to all Site 98 staff. And it is sadly informing us that Director Call passed away at 8:43 today following the confrontation with U.S. Army deserters. Right now, we are thinking it is suicide. If you'd like to know more about the specific circumstances, read on, but you're under no obligation to. And here's where we have some explanation for all of this. Long story short, in the midst of all the confusion, Halson went looking for the director, had trouble finding him, and found all sorts of, terrible sights in the midst of this battle that's going on, seeing all of the differences in the programming kind of being evident. Some people fully aware, all at once that they're in a war zone, and some just walking away very orderly-like, and notes that, one place had all of its cameras and such turned off. 34 Lambert Street, which had a TV playing inside, one of the first cartoons that Taw 2 had come up with, and Simon was immediately visible when he walked in, sat on the couch, a pistol in one hand, and his brains on the wall behind him. Didn't have much of a face left, so I couldn't tell you what he was feeling at the end, and there was a little girl on the couch next to him, 6 or 7. She was the one watching cartoons, and there were some blood and brains on her face too, of course. She was so close after all, but she wouldn't notice, we wouldn't let her notice. So what we find is Halson goes through Call's personal files, after the fact at the guidelines in particular that he had set for the -2 population, and he'd seen them before and knew it was, incredible work designing 6,000 different people. His personal version of the guidelines had his notes on every one of these specimens, and he didn't realize what he was looking at first. Most of these notes were a single word, a job, a date, a street, but started to understand once he looked at the notes that weren't so short. Long paragraphs, cherished memories, names for the specimens that weren't the ones we'd given them. These weren't random faces. They were people Simon had known, every single one of them recreated as he'd known them. His childhood teachers, his parents, his colleagues, his neighbors, his friends, his siblings, his briefest encounters, mailmen, bank tellers, people he'd passed on the street. His wife, his daughter. I'd seen his daughter. I realized that as soon as I saw her picture. I'd seen her watching cartoons with her father's blood on her face. He'd done that. I had done that. She didn't even notice when we took the body out. But the thing is, it wouldn't really have mattered even if she had noticed. Samantha Call is dead, after all. Gone. It's all gone, isn't it? I think we need to rethink this whole project. End article. This thing comes at you at the end just with a sledgehammer, and I really liked this piece on a number of levels. We set out for the sort of brand new setting with a lot of room to maneuver for writers. I actually already did a follow-up Tanhoney did of this event Indigo, one of the other pieces that he did this week. And, it is, normally this wouldn't be a terribly believable story, but it's the foundation. You could totally see, somebody in a position of power with access to resources like this, demanding something like this. And it explains why they were so picky about every part of these -2 entities. It was a really compelling story wrapped up very nicely at the end. It also answers that whole why. Why are we doing this? Well, this is presumably everybody that this director knew, loved, cared about, are all gone. And so, you have the ability to try and preserve them in some way. It is a difficult thing to turn down. So, I initially thought we were going to have this real, mad scientist, evil character in this director, but in the end, I think you end up feeling a lot of sympathy for them. And that's to this piece's credit. This was really, really well done. This was a very hearty +1 from me. Now, before we get into the last skip, we got a long boy of the week, and this long boy is a long, long boy. This boy looks at the other long boys and says, "You're not all that long." This thing's over 9,000 words, I believe. It is SCP-4971, Rituals by DJ Cactus. This was probably the strongest skip of the week. Really interesting characters included in, a logical build. We have exploration logs that have, terrifying twists, and then immediately like a smash cut into very dry documentation in a way that I think really amplifies the horror. We have a new esoteric class that is currently at +106, so I won't spoil that. I think it is, I get it. We've got, a reasonable, I'm okay with it. I'm not the ornery bastard I once was about esoteric classes. If it's justified and it doesn't get too much shine in the way of the work, I'm good with it. This actually did get a fair amount. So we have a good sort of backing for what this new class is, and how we actually have some votes against establishing the class, which I kind of enjoy. But yeah, we've got these groups of interest that are really, really interesting. We have a very cool sort of alternate universe constructed within a mall. We have a forest, and within the forest we have a cult And within the cult, we have, you know what, I'm going to leave it there. There's some really cool imagery going on. And when I say that, I mean images created by Cactus for the direct benefit of this work. They are really intriguing. It's something that it's so bizarre and disjointed from what you would expect in these exploration logs and what you would expect to see, that I think it actually is more believable just for how different it really is. Particularly the Cactus calls this SCP-4971-inverse delta. I told him it's 4971-Jeff because it's an upside down triangle, and I'm not pronouncing that. So be warned, you give me something I can't pronounce, it's going to be a Steve or a Dave or a Jeff, whatever, as the spirit moves me. But I was absolutely hooked by this thing. And originally I see it like, God damn it, Cactus, why is this thing so long? What story needs this many words? Why, you could have done less words and told this thing. This thing flew by. Really, really interesting, really action packed. Really, really loved this piece. 4971 Rituals by DJ Cactus. Now, last but not least, SCP-4468, titled Take a Wish, by Darkstuff and Uncle Nicolini. The header is from Ryza, saying that the anomaly last manifested August 19th, 1998, and it is considered neither neutralized nor explained, but it has been deemed inactive after this 16-year hiatus, and will soon be ARCed. We're going to put it as 4468-ARC. I like this little nod to ARC as something that actually exists canonically in the universe. I think that's kind of cool. And it will be kept there, available for the GOI 386 research team. And so the image is of looks like a child in a hospital bed hugging a big stuffed dog or a bear. It's a little hard to see from this angle. My money is on dog. We have an object class of safe and fairly short procedures due to the difficult to detect, harmless, and self-neutralizing nature of the skip and -A. There are no containment procedures in place. That's interesting, and should probably be challenged. So we'll see what we come up with here. Additionally, per Ethics Committee Mandate MW4468, the Foundation is not to interfere with the spread of, nor attempt to contain 4468 in its current state. Any collected instances are to be distributed to members of its research team at the discretion of the project lead. It is described as stuffed animals of varying designs and size, which are somatically linked to individual terminally ill children designated -A that have been visited by the Make-A-Wish Foundation. When the stuffed animals are hugged or otherwise handled in a gentle, loving manner, the associated child will report the sensation of being hugged or comforted. The manifestations themselves of these animals have never been observed, but they can be found within the child's family residence within 48 hours after the child has been visited by the Make-A-Wish Foundation. They most commonly appear within the child's toy collection when applicable, and otherwise tend to appear on their beds. They're identifiable for having tags that read Make-A-Wish and underneath Hug Me. They exhibit no mimetic properties, but notably all children have expired within 3 weeks of 4468 manifestation, and it is theorized that 4468 is predictive and only manifests on children with no chance of recovery. All of these stuffed animals to date have ceased anomalous activity upon the death of their associated -A instance. Grim stuff, and currently we don't really explain anything that we set up in the Ryza header or the procedures, so we have a fair bit of ground to cover in this addendum, which is an interview with the 32nd instance of -A. And the first one of the first that was discovered by the Foundation prior to death. So we have an agent holding an interview disguised as a nurse working at the hospital, carrying an audio recorder and filled in details later, such as subjects nodding when writing the report. We could probably assume that could probably be omitted. We don't usually ask that question. So we have our interview log, and our child is not super thrilled with the interview in the beginning, but warms up when we start talking about the bear. And the agent indicates, trying to get the kid to smile a little bit and talking about the bear that he used to have. And we ask the kid if their mom gave it to them, and the mom is actually there and says, "Oh no, I thought one of the doctors brought it for him. I was at work until about half an hour ago. I just got here." And the Dash Ace says, "Mr. Bear from the Wish People gave it to me." And mom says, "Brian?" And he says, "No, Bear. He was really nice. He did some tricks for me before giving me my teddy." And the agent asks, "Had you ever seen him before?" The kid says, "No." The mom says, "It's okay. The Make-A-Wish people are your friends." And describes him a little bit, the kid does. Says his hair was black, he was really, really, really tall. He also had a white and blue suit, and his face was painted like this bear. And the agent says, "All right, I'll keep an eye out for him. How's the bear treating you?" And says, "He's always with me. He's my favorite friend." And the mom leaves, and agent and the little kid are talking, and wants to get some more info, and asks for a little more info on Mr. Bear. He said, "He was funny. He made balloons come out of his ears." Agent says, "Did he do anything weird?" And Dash A says, "He came in with a lot of other Wish People, but they fell asleep standing when he snapped his fingers." And we asked, "Did Mr. Bear do anything else?" Dash A says, "He told me he could make me feel better." Agent says, "Yeah, how was he going to do that?" And Dash A says, "He told me to close my eyes and hold out my hand, but he told me not to tell anyone." And so we have to get them to tell us this little secret. And the secret is, he said, "I heard him say ouch. He grabbed my hand and his hands were wet, and then I felt weird." And we ask, "What kind of weird?" He says, "I couldn't let go. Then I got really tired." And the agent says, "That's a weird trick. What happened after that?" Dash A says, "His hands glowed a little, and then he put on a Band-Aid." "Was he hurt?" "Yeah, but only a little. Can you get Mr. Bear to come back? I want to see more tricks, and I was too tired to see them all when he came." The agent says, "I tell you what, if I find him, I'll tell him you want to see more tricks." And agent says, "One more question, okay? Did he make you feel better?" And Dash A says, "He made me feel tired, but the teddy's good. He makes me happy." And we have a little farewell. We named him, Dash A names him Reggie. And Dash A expires in March of 96, and the agent notes the subject's medical chart projected their date of expiration to be in January of the following year. And we go to a second addendum, a letter received by Dr. Everwood from the GOI 386 Research Team Collective Mailbox, used for internal deliveries. This envelope was pale yellow with a large purple wax W seal. Having never interacted with 4468, the research team expressed confusion until further investigation revealed the likely connection. The letter was found to read, "From February 24th, 1999, from the desk of the kookiest fulfiller of wishes. Dear SCP Foundation, C.M. Wondertainment has recently passed away and I have taken his place. I can assure you that our only dealings with the Make-A-Wish Foundation will be of anonymous financial support from here on out. We are sincerely sorry for any trouble we may have caused. I have no doubt that you noticed the Make-A-Wish telehuggers have been discontinued. I feel that you are entitled to know that those were the work of the previous Dr. Wondertainment, and the new administration has deemed them uncouth. The current Dr. Wondertainment Company does not endorse the tampering and or taking of children's souls for any purposes, but especially not when such tampering inevitably reduces a child's lifespan. Consequently, the creation of another popular line of Dr. Wondertainment products have been discontinued. Dr. H. L. Wondertainment. End article. So, Dark Stuff has been working very diligently for quite a while on creating a much darker take on Wondertainment, and this knocks it out of the park. We don't really, we know the sort of thing that Wondertainment is looking for, the sort of things that power them, and this is a very direct way of going about it. They are, it's messed up. It's very messed up. One thing here at the end, the Dr. Wondertainment products is in quotes, that is a link to the Tales of Mr. Collector. These are all the different Mr. Collectors, of which we have, I believe, like 20 of them at this point. And then Wondertainment links to the Wonder World Hub. This thing is full of nods to other bits of Wondertainment history. The tags tell you a little bit more that might be going on with Brainy Brian, which is linked to the Vendafriend Hub. And Wondertainment has a lot of depth, a surprising amount of depth for what they are. This piece was really, really dark. And it's rough stuff. It was well done. It was a +1. Now, before we get out of here, I have a few mailbag questions that are, these are all pretty good. AIS Mallard asks, what would you recommend to listeners who enjoy hearing about newer articles and want to become more engaged with the community/writers on the site? I think there is really only one answer for this. If you want to get more engaged with the community and with the writers, the bulk of that communication happens in IRC, not on Reddit, not in any of the Discords that are out there. It's on the SCP Wiki chat. And in getting more engaged and understanding these writers and their motivations and how they operate, the best advice I can give is join and take it in. Just listen and learn for a while. I think when I joined back in 2012, I think I was in the chat for probably 10 days or 2 weeks before I said a word. Just hearing people understand, who the regulars are, what they're like, the sort of things that you can safely ask and not give offense or not get into the weeds or say something that's, going to, set off a bunch of people. It's a community. It's like any others. There's going to be topics that you might innocently bring up, and it's gonna, that's it for the day. It's just that's all they're going to talk about. So I feel like it really is the only answer for getting at the heart of the community. The forums are good for seeing how certain people interact, but if you want to, really focus on a lot of the writers, the really prolific ones, every one of the people that had a piece today is it can be found in the IRC on a very regular basis. I feel like that really is the way to go. Mini Meats asks, is there a point in the drafting process where involving readers or crit can be too soon or too late for your SCP? And I think no in both cases. I think it's never too soon to get different people looking at your pitch, at your draft, because what can happen is you can end up with a better base premise or idea than you even initially thought of. And, if you're early enough in the game, it's not too painful or not too difficult to pivot and work along those lines. On the too late side, it's never too late so long as you are willing to make the changes if they are suggested to you. So that's a really, subjective, personal sort of thing. I know a not insignificant number of people, and most people won't admit it either, that they'll, submit a thing late for review for crit because it's the thing you're supposed to do, and they get stuff. They get significant issues, questions, things that people don't understand, but it's so late in the game that they look at what they would have to do to make it work, and they're just lost because they've spent so much time trying to get it into this state, and now it represents maybe having to change a lot of things or back up or insert things that they hadn't really thought of. And sometimes people don't do it at all. So I don't think that's a given. I think it is very much up to the writer. And it is something that, if you're going to ask for crit, you damn well better be prepared to put it to work when you're given it, because there is so much material out and about that, not having, not being one to put that into practice will be noticed eventually. People will note, you know what, I tried to help you out before and you didn't listen to a word I said, or at least it appears that way. So be aware of that when you are soliciting critique, that you are, listening, putting it into practice, and maybe even thanking them for helping you out along the way. Lastly, Christian Wright asks, what is your opinion of the new Parawatch GOI? I love this thing. Now, Parawatch is, it's a little meta. It has a beautiful theme. It's black and white. I love the way this thing looks. Basically, what we have is the Parawatch is a forum whereby this group of users is sharing unsolved mysteries on this web forum. So it's very meta. These guys are, in universe, they're like conspiracy theorists, and they don't always have the right of what they're experiencing, and importantly, they have no real sway. They have no real influence on the universe as we've constructed. I think that's actually going to be a very important part of this, in giving it some unique flavor. This is had a good amount of work done to it already. Nat Voltaic, the Great Hippo, and Roger all contributing very heavily to this GOI. I am huge fans of all three of those writers. This, I don't want to say it's destined for greatness, but it is surely got the right backing to really shine. And that's about it. We are just about out of here. The first of the two CollabCon recaps went out on Wednesday to patrons and will be available this coming Wednesday. That is, where's my calendar? That is the 14th for the general public on scp.cafe and all of the usual suspects. The second half of the recap will be recorded soon. I'm actually hoping to do it Sunday, and if so, I'll just go ahead and release it on Sunday as well. I'm going to be very busy with cafe stuff this weekend, I should say, getting all the care packages together, doing some bonus recording for CollabCon recap, but I'm having a lot of fun. Thank you guys for sticking along for the ride, and if you thought this show was worth $1, patreon.com/scpcafe is probably the best way to accomplish that. I will see you guys soon, depending on whether you're a patron or not, depending on whether you listen to the recaps or all the bonus content that we put out. I'll see you soon. Keep reading, keep writing, and I'll see you on the other side.